access to the chat window because I'll be using questions and my session
Yes,
will
ma'am.
be
Yes, ma'am.
interactive.
They
Yeah.
can put on the chat box, everyone.
Okay, fine. Good, good, good. Right. So this is how the flow of the presentation will be. We'll start with what is communication. First, few topics you already would have covered or would have talked about these topics number of times. So we'll be covering about what is communication process, what are various modes of communication, why there is a need for effective communication, how you can become a good communicator, what are 7 C's of communication, and lastly, what are the communication challenges for the teachers. And there'll be a lot of interaction all throughout the presentation. So normally I don't like one-way interaction wherein only I'm speaking and the audience on the other side is only listening. So I prefer a two-way communication so that there also is a lot of learning for me in all my sessions. And also it's very challenging in online mode of communication because you also have to keep on checking whether the audience on the other side actually is attentive or not. So there'll be a lot of interaction and a few quizzes also in between. So as I said, I prefer a lot of interaction and communication in my presentation. So, when we talk about what is communication, first, I would like to understand from all of you. My question is that when we talk about communication, what are the various things that comes to your mind? When we say communication, it is just about speaking and listening, or there is something more to it. So I want all of you to share your views in the chat window. Whenever we say communication, we normally think that I have to, say something, or I have to listen to something. So it is just that, or there are a lot of other aspects also that goes into understanding what actually communication is. Right. So facial expressions, body language, non-verbal communication, body posture, expressions, expressing emotions. Professor Nupur have mentioned, right. So when we talk about communication, it is not just speaking your thoughts out or listening to the other person. It actually is also a lot of other things. The research says it's a two-way process. Good. Dr. Sanjay, Dr. Ameshwar have written connect to each other. Professor Rajni, body language, and so on. So research says that when we talk about communication, it is just 10% comprises of words. And in addition to words, the tone also matters a lot. And also, as most of you said, body language also is very important. Today
Yes.
we are on the other
근데 그
side of the
스마트
table.
카드 수업 때문에 왼쪽 배아이 훈훈아.
Is it something, Professor?
85,777.
I think Professor Mavia, you are, thank you. Right. So it is 30% tone and 60% body language. So I was saying that today all of us are on the other side of the table, wherein we are a teacher, we are someone who is giving instructions, imparting education to the children. But we have been on the other side of the table also, wherein we used to classify some teachers as, बहुत bore hai. And some teachers, we used to love the classes because the learning was imparted in a very, very different and interesting manner. So that is why we say that body language also is important and the tone is also important. At times you would have noticed class mein padhte padhte neend aa gayi, right? Because the session was not that interesting, or maybe the tone was such that you were not attentive all throughout the session. So even the tone at which you are interacting with the audience also matters a lot. And definitely body language is also one of the components that needs to be looked into when we talk about communication. Moving on, this is communication process, which all of us have learned in our graduation or in our post-graduation days, that in the communication process, we have a receiver, we have a sender, and then there is a mode through which the communication happens. And then there is a lot of noise, because of which at times the message is not being interpreted in the same way as it was sent by the sender. So we have to be very careful about what mode of communication we are using, and also that there should not be enough noise in between to ensure that our message reaches the receiver the same way in which we intend to send it. And in the current scenario, wherein we have, there's a question before that. In the current scenario, we also have a lot of online platforms which also are being used for communication process, like the way we are communicating right now. This is online mode, which was not so frequent before COVID, but after that, we as an educator have adapted also this mode of communication for various reasons, and it in fact have become very, very fruitful in the sense that we can connect to large number of audience sitting at remote places. Like we have 122 participants who are connected in this particular session, and I'm connected from Pune, and we are from different parts of the country. So this is one of the benefit of online medium, but definitely it has its own advantages and disadvantages. So having said that, since all of us are in the education field, so the question, I think, so all of us are in the education field, and the major stakeholder with whom we communicate is primarily our students. But in addition to that, we also communicate with other stakeholders also. So the question, first of all, is that who are the other stakeholders whom we communicate with? And secondly, do we communicate with them in the same way? So everyone have written no, which means that we do not communicate in the same way. So let's, I look forward to the answer to my first question, which is, who are the stakeholders in addition to students? Are there other stakeholders also with whom we communicate? Okay, fine. Dr. Chitra have mentioned parents. Who are the other stakeholders whom we communicate with as an educator? Fine. Colleagues, good. Authority, management, departments, local community administration, management, and so on. All right. So when we're talking about the communication process, we communicate differently with different stakeholders. So when we talk about who are these stakeholders whom we communicate with, definitely students are our major stakeholders. And in addition to that, we also communicate with peers within and outside the organization. As an educator, when we are planning to participate in a research conference, or we are planning to conduct a training session, or doing consultancy for companies, we also communicate with a lot of external stakeholders. Apart from that, we communicate with our subordinates, with the parents, with the HODs, and the top management. The next question now is, do we communicate same way with all of them? Dr. Chitra is most attentive. I get her response, well within time. Good. Right. So we do not communicate with each one of them in the same manner. What is the reason for that? When we say our stakeholders are students, our stakeholders are parents, our colleagues, our subordinates. So why do you think we do not communicate with them in the same manner? So it differs from person to person due to hierarchy. Good. We have different relationships with them. Good. Line of communication. Fine. Right. Diversity. Good. Can we have more points? More reasons as to, why we communicate differently with different persons. I'm sure, within your organizations, you would have come across a lot of challenges or differences as to how we communicate differently from one person to another. So horizontal and vertical communication makes a difference. Professor Nisha have mentioned that. Perspective differ. Goal is different language. Dr. Anu Frita. Diversity, fine, good. So why we communicate differently Our roles and positions also makes a difference. We communicate differently if we are communicating to the subordinate. We communicate in a different way when we are communicating with the HODs or top management. Level of comfort, good. Different messages to convey. So there are different reasons because of which the communication is different, right? One can be purpose of communication, as some of you also have mentioned in the chat, that if the communication is happening in a class wherein we are interacting with the students, so we'll be communicating in a different way, because there we are communicating to impart some learnings to the students. When we are communicating with our peers, our colleagues, maybe on writing a research paper, so there the communication will be different, wherein we'll be discussing to come up with a with an innovative idea on which we can write a research paper. Also the context, whether it's a formal meeting, it's an informal chat, it's a written report, or we're communicating over email. So that also makes a difference, individual difference. So someone also wrote it in the chat box. With our friends, we are comfortable, communicating with them in any way. But the people with whom we do not have such closeness, we try to be formal, or we try to be cautious at times as to how we should be communicating with them. Emotional intelligence, how the other person will basically perceive the message. That also have to be kept in mind. Clarity and conciseness. So you have to be very clear. Your message needs to be very clear and concise so that people can understand it properly. Then also at times when the person on the other side is sort of lacking patience, then at time you also have to, give opportunity for that person to speak first, and then you can give your perspective later. Then we also have to be mindful about our body language, about our tone and facial expressions. Cultural sensitivity, someone wrote that in the chat box, that we also have to be respectful about the norms and communication styles and the cultural values and the beliefs of people with whom we are communicating. Building trust and rapport and feedback are some of the key considerations that we have to keep in mind while we are communicating across various stakeholders. And these are various mode of communication I was talking about previously, that because of this online thing coming in, as compared to when we were in school, there only, classroom was the only mode of communication with our teachers. But in the current scenario, there are multiple modes of communication. We communicate with the students on email, on WhatsApp group that we create for them. We also communicate with them in an online mode, and definitely the classrooms are there for face-to-face conversations. So, this particular diagram, which is in form of a funnel, specifically reflects as to what is the quality of communication essentially when we move from written communication like memos and letters to face-to-face communication. When we have face-to-face communication, it is considered to be a more rich mode of communication as compared to sending a mail or writing a letter and stuff like that. Similarly, the communication over email is not so frequent, is very frequent, but video conference is another mode of communication on the other hand are very infrequent. So that is how the quality of communication and the frequency depends or varies as we move from one mode of communication to another mode of communication. So now there is a quiz. I'll pause for a while. So the question is, which mode of communication is rich on qualitative communication parameter? And the options are video conference, live speech, face-to-face, and all of the above. Could someone wrote B? Live speech is just one-way communication, wherein a good example is politicians giving a speech during a rally and so on. So C, face-to-face communication is always considered to be the best mode of communication. Good, good, good. So I'm glad that, all of you are attentive even after a post-lunch session. Good. Now, the next question is, why do we have to be effective in our communication? We always say, at times we think that I'm not so good a communicator. I cannot communicate properly with the stakeholders. And then we say, XYZ is very good at communication, is very good at communicating with others. I'm not so good. At times we create benchmarks for ourselves, or we start comparing ourselves with others, and we develop those negativities at times within ourselves, that he is good at communication and I'm not so good, right? So why do you think we need to be effective in our communication? Building strong relationship, understanding others, and resolving conflicts. Good. To convey our message clearly and persuade. To make the receiver understand in the same sense. Good, Dr. Chitra. To express one's feeling. Good, Professor Doshila. To convey right info, Professor Ruchi. Same surname as mine, Ruchi. Ruchi Mauriya. To convey right info, fine, good. So at times we strive to be good in our communication because it is important, not just for our professional growth, but also it is required at the personal front. At times, whenever there is a conflict at home, and after a few hours, we do introspection and we think, if I would not have said it this way, then the conflict might not have been there, right? That's a simple example all of us can relate with. And whenever we have conflict with our spouse, with our parents, or the other family members, after some time we realize that, maybe there was a communication gap, or the way we communicated our issues was not the right way to do so. And similarly, in the professional front also, we have to be effective as far as our communication is concerned. And being a teacher, it is equally more important because we have to be effective to be the best in the class. Because our primary role is to deliver lectures. And until unless we will be effective, we will have clarity on what we have to teach in the class, we will not be able to do justice to our job. So that is why we have to be more effective. We have considerably more burden on our shoulders, that we have to be an effective communicator. So it is important for professional and personal success. And also the capacity to communicate is often seen as an indicator of your ability and also your intelligence. And one thing which I would like to point out here is that, you always cannot relate good communication with intelligence, right? If you will talk to the scientist, right, you might feel that they are not so good at communication, but the intelligence level is much, much high. Similarly, a person with a science background, or maybe a statistician, might not be so good at communicating, wherein English faculty definitely is the best one in any college as far as communication skills are concerned. So what we have to do is that being a teacher, and with so many tools available with us these days, we have to be more effective in our communication. And compared to our counterparts, maybe 2-3 decades back, wherein they only had a chalk and a whiteboard to teach, as compared to them, we have a lot of tools which we can actually use in our classroom setting. So we should actually use all these tools to make our communication more effective. So the next question is, what are the skills required to become a good communicator? And I look forward to the responses in the chat window. According to you, you can be right, you can be wrong. I must say that no questions, no answers are right or wrong. I just look forward to your perspective as to what are the skills required to be a good communicator. So communicating with sharing feelings, good, Professor Rajkumar. To be a good listener first, good, Professor Kritika. Good command on language, good, Professor Ruchi. Good listener, good pronunciation, okay. Good use of words, good communication, clarity of thought, use good language. I agree with Professor Parul, clarity of thoughts. In addition to words and language, clarity of thought is very, very important to be an effective communicator. Communicate with expression. Okay, fine. Subject knowledge, Dr. Chitra, correct. Fine. I'm not looking for good communication. I'm just asking what are the skills to become a good communicator. Good listener, knowledge, language, clarity of thoughts. Ask questions to clarify understanding. Good, Dr. Stella. Empathy. Think before you say. Fine, good. Direct, empathetic, factual presentations. Good listener. Fine. So there are a lot of, points that I have in the next slide. And I just wanted to check how much of that can you cover build strong relationship, audible, knowledge of subject and literature. Fine. So let's move on to the next slide, which essentially talks about what are the skills required to be a good communicator. So first, as all of you said, we're not talking about grammar, punctuations, and choice of words and so on. So when we are talking about communication, to be a good communicator, and again, we'll be looking at both the perspective as to how you can become a good communicator when you are there as a speaker, and also how you can become a good communicator when you are there on the other side and you're listening, right? So when we talk about from the perspective of a speaker, so what's important is content, right? Until and unless you will have a good content with you, you cannot be a good teacher in the class. I'll give you one simple example. I teach international business. I'm a faculty of management. And fortunately, when we talk about management, we have lots and lots of examples, real world examples in the world out here that we can discuss in the class. So for example, if I'm teaching international business, so I have two options. I'll just make my slide, go and read out the slide, and maybe explain in between that this is what international business is. Or maybe if I have to talk about how international business is important, right? Again, I can write down few points that, these are the major advantages of international business. That's one way of teaching the subject in the class. The other is I take a news article, right, which talks about maybe how India have grown and become a powerful economy. Now we say that India is the fifth largest economy. So I can just take an article by World Bank or maybe IMF and so on, or maybe any of the leading business magazine. I take that article to the class and ask the student to read, wherein they get an understanding about how Indian economy have grown since 1992. That is, since we liberalized, right? So that is, again, now we have, since I have content, I have examples. So it will be, my class will be more interesting. Because what actually is happening is that every student is reading that article first. And when they are reading the article, they are able to connect themselves with the topic. Otherwise, if I'll just go in the class with my slide and explain the slide, I might not be able to, establish that connect with the student. So it's always better that you give them a good half a page write-up to read before the class, before you take up any topic in the class, just ask them to read. And after that, introduce the topic, engage in discussions. Normally, this is how I do. Before taking up any topic in any MDP or in the class, I try to engage with the audience first, because that I'm able to establish that connect with the student, with the audience. And then I see that, I feel that when I leave the class, I have given a good lecture. So that's very important, and it will happen only when you have good content with you. If you have a theory, you also should have real life examples with that. And when you'll club it together, definitely your content will be rich, and you'll be able to communicate more effectively in the class. And student also will feel that, our doubts are being answered. We get an opportunity to communicate in the class. It's not a one-way communication. So that is how, when I say content, it is not just about having a slide with a lot of content in it. Essentially, we're talking about a lot of examples, a lot of methodologies, or a lot of options wherein you can communicate with the students. So all those things should be there to make your presentations very rich. The other one is confidence. So whenever you're taking a topic, when you will have a lot of content with yourself, you'll be confident. Remember, it would have happened with all of us, with me also, that, when we had to take a subject for the first time, we were not so confident, because that was the first time we were discussing that topic in the class. But eventually, over the years, when we started taking that subject for the third and fourth time, we didn't have to, refer to those slides, and we could go on and on a particular topic. So it happened because over the years, we have developed the confidence on talking about that subject. So similarly, if you have to talk on a topic for the first time, you must rehearse. And fortunately, as I said, we have a lot of tools available with us. If you have to speak in a conference or for a guest lecture, what I normally do is that I record as to what I have to speak. Maybe I record the audio, or I make a video to see as to, how good or how well I'll be able to deliver in a particular session. So the more we will practice, the more confident we will be. So just remember my words again. Good communication does not mean good control over language. Good communication does not mean choice of words. It actually means the content. Content is the key to good communication. If you will have more content, you will have more to speak, you will have more confidence. And the third is enthusiasm. You should be enthusiastic to speak on a particular subject. But, Professor Alka Mauriya would have given me a topic to talk about, maybe on financial analytics, or maybe fintech, right? And I would have taken that subject. I would not have been so confident. I would not have been enthusiastic, because that's not the subject that interests me. So if you will pick up the relevant subject, you will be confident and you will be enthusiastic about talking on that particular topic. The next one is clear objective and aim. Right. So you have to define as to what is the objective of your session, and whether you are able to touch upon each and every aspect. Right. So just also try to note down few points as to what you will be covering in your presentation, so that you don't deviate. At times, when we sit down to write a research paper, we start from one topic or one perspective, and when we finish, we are not able to relate with what we have concluded with, from where we started. So that is why it's very, very important that we should have very clear objectives, so that we are focused as to, what all content should be there in our presentation and so on. There should be a well-written script. So when these online tools were not there, so the teachers, you must be able to relate with me that specifically in our English classes or literature classes, or maybe in our social science classes, the students were made to read out the chapter. Or maybe the teachers used to read out the chapter so that students could relate with that. So that is how the communication used to happen during that point of time. But as I said, with time, things have evolved. So it is not just script. We have these presentations with us. We have a lot of other tools that helps us in, being sticking to the structure that we have to talk about, or points that we have to talk upon. So a very well-written script is also very important. It should not happen that, in the previous slide, I would have touched upon some other point, and the next slide, I'm talking about something absolutely irrelevant. So a well-written script is also very important. There should be effective start. Right. If you will have a effective start, as I said, normally in my class, I don't start with a lecture. I start by giving them a short caselet. And then once students also are able to grasp as to what we will be discussing in the class, I'm able to connect with them better. So that is why you should develop a strategy as to how you should be starting your session, or how you'll be starting your lecture. That is also very, very important. Then clear voice, you should be audible, each and every word or should be clear to the audience. And after that is the speed. This reminds me of a very interesting thing that is happening these days. I'm sure those of you having kids also will be able to relate with me. Students these days also have developed a tendency to study from YouTube channels. And can anyone just share in the chat as to what I'm actually thinking to talk about when we see students studying from the YouTube channel? And when I'm talking about speed, what actually I have in my mind, if anyone can just think about it and share it in the chat window. Correct. So what they do is that they increase the speed of the video. So if they'll increase the speed to 2x, 1.5x, so that they are able to, finish the video in less than half of the time, right? So that might make sense when you are engaged in an online session, but when you are, studying from from YouTube, but in such live sessions, definitely speed matters a lot. So your speed should be such that the audience are able to understand what you are trying to convey. Right, good. Then is a logical sequence. So when I started with my presentation, I gave you a flow of my presentation that this is how I'll be going. It not only helps me in making the sequence of my presentations in logical manner, but also it also has the objective that the audience, it will be easier for the audience also to understand, because we are putting together the same things together. So we are creating groups. We talked about various mode of communication. We talked about why it is important to be effective communicator. Then right now we are talking about how you can become a good communicator when you are a speaker. Then we'll be talking about how you can become a good communicator when you are a listener, and so on. So when you have this logical flow of thoughts, it not only gives you confidence while you're presenting your session, while you're taking the session, but it also helps the audience in relating and understanding what is being talked about. Then is the local language. When I took this session for the first time, I asked the professor that, which language should I be interacting in? So he said that since the academicians are there from all over India, so it's better that we must stick to English as a language medium of instruction. Otherwise, I go to different places also for a lot of sessions on international business. So I always ask the organizers as to what is the best mode of communication. At times they say, you can use English because it is not possible to communicate in the local language. So definitely the idea is to basically check whether you have to just speak in English or Hindi or a combination of both the languages. So that is also very important. Then courtesy, which means that you should try and acknowledge the views of others also. Because when we are there inside a class, at times the student differ with what we try to convey. So we should not, being a teacher, we also always should not try to, tell them to be quiet. We also should be courteous enough to listen to their point of views and then tell them what is right or wrong. Then time limit. I still remember my college days when some of the professor used to, take classes beyond the scheduled time, and we used to specifically the sessions before lunch. The thought process used to be class kab khatam hoga, bhook lag rahi hai. So, those are the other things which also we have to keep in mind while making our presentation so that we are able to finish it within time. And last is effective end. So like the way we think of a effective start, we also must have a very strong and effective end. I'll talk about it later when I'll be there on the last slide of my presentation, to just convey to you that how, we should think of a effective end. I don't know how many of you watch these stand-ups. Anyone just, write down in the chat window, how many of you listen to these stand-up comedians? Good. How many of you have ever listened to their interviews? I watch sometimes. Good, right? How many of you have listened to their interviews? Some of them whom I listen to regularly are Anshu Moore and Bassi, right? Just try to listen to their interviews. And what you will see that they always struggle with how to end the session, right? And at times, when you'll watch their interview, you will see that they also talk about, how they got the idea, how to end the stand-up, right? So similarly, even the classrooms are classroom sessions should be designed in such a way that not only the start, but the ending should also be very effective. And those of you who watch these stand-ups also will be able to make out that the end always relates with something which was there in the session, right? And you must listen to their interviews and see that, how hard they struggle to have a very effective end, because that is also very important in a stand-up. So that is what I want to convey out here, is that as a teacher, it is very important for us also to ensure that to have a very interesting session, it is not important to have a good start, but it is also equally important that we should have a good end. Professor Ankita have written on how to engage audience after they end one joke which does not get good response. Good, right? So we have to be creative. At times, during the classroom itself, we end up taking questions, or uh, we end up having discussions on topics which we had not thought of, but which are actually relevant for that particular topic. So we have to be creative. We have to be ready for any kind of response in the class, and we will be able to do so if we will focus on the first point, which is content, which is very, very important. So when we say that, what is essentially required for good communication, I always think it's content, other than any other thing, whether it is grammar and good language and other thing. I think content is very important. If you have good content, you'll be able to put across your point, because then you'll be having very valid points for you to express in a discussion. Fine. So we have spoken about how we can the other points which are also very important when we are there as a speaker, because when we started the session, some of you also mentioned that to be a good communication, it is equally important to be a good listener. When we go inside a class, we cannot just end up the complete session by just giving our presentations, right? We feel good when we have interaction in the class. We feel good when we are able to answer the questions raised by the student. Because why the students raise question? Because they were trying to understand the topic which you were taking in the class. I normally tell my students, if after finishing 4 to 5 slides, if you do not have what, why, and how in your mind, it means that you were not attentive in the class. It might not be possible after one slide, but after 5 slides, definitely you should have at least one what, why, and how. Only then I can assume that you were listening to me. Otherwise, it means that you were sleeping in the class. So that is why. And when the students have questions, definitely we have to be patient to listen to what they have to speak. One of the problem which I normally face in the class is that when the student asks questions, they are not so clear as to what they want to ask, or they are not able to put up the question clearly to the teacher. How many of you also face the same problem, and what solution you come up with? I know it's difficult for you to type, but if any one of you can just write in the chat window, if you also face the same problem that student are not able to put up the questions clearly. And in such scenario, what is your response, or how do you react to that thing in the class? One option is that, we simply, because when a student asks questions, the normal reaction is the other students start laughing, right? And then the students become very uncomfortable. He thinks many questions kyo pucha. But we have to control that particular situation to make the student feel important, that yes, you are on the right path. At least you were listening. At least you were attentive. At least you were thinking. And that is why you have a question in your mind. So, which is the good thing that we must praise in the class. So control that scenario. Some of you have written that you ask them to change the language. Good, right? I try to ask them easy questions. Fine, good. It is not about Professor Ankita. It is not about you asking them questions. I try to ask them easy questions. It is not you asking questions. The student are asking questions and are not able to, word it properly, or are not able to put it up properly. So that is the scenario we are talking about. So Professor Om Prakash have written, help them out to clear their questions first, right? If they are not clear in posing the questions, then we ask them questions that, this is what you want to ask. Professor Safina have mentioned that we appreciate them for asking them and explain to them if my understanding of the question is correct, right? So until unless you will be a good listener, you will not be able to identify the gap. And then you will not be able to take up the question properly and answer it properly again in the class. So we have to be a good listener. And what comes in between is that at times we jump to conclusion. Even before the student is able to finish the question, we stop him midway and we tell him, okay, I've already covered it in the previous slide. Were you not listening during that point of time? So rather than giving them opportunity to complete their question, we jump to conclusion. And at times we wander in our own thoughts and are not able to understand the question properly. And it is also equally important that if the student is not able to put up the question properly, then we have to, filter out the unimportant part and put the question precisely, which again will be possible if we are a good listener. So being a good listener always is very important. And at times when we are not a good listener, we just want to put forward and we want to just keep on emphasizing on what we think is right. At times, we also end up arguing and debating in the class, right? Debating is good till the time it's a healthy discussion which is happening. The student also is able to respect your point. You are also able to convince the student that, he's slightly deviating from the topic and so on. At times, there are a few faculty who always say, or a few resource person I've noticed in some of the conferences who say, I'll take the question towards the end, right? But when there are two things to it, that maybe one of the reason is that whatever questions you had in mind are covered during the course of discussion itself. And at times, also it happens that, even though they say that we will take questions at the end, we are not left with time to respond to the questions. But in our classrooms, we don't have such limitations. So try and create that kind of atmosphere wherein students are comfortable asking questions in the class. One of the major reasons because of which students do not ask question is that they have a fear of getting offended, maybe by the teacher or by the fellow colleagues itself. So as Professor Safina have mentioned that, we appreciate the student that at least, you were attentive, you had the confidence to stand up and ask questions. So that also is very, very important. We teach to MBA students and, during their tenure of just 2 years, we also have to ensure that they end up getting placement in good companies. So I always tell them, the classroom is a platform wherein you can fearlessly ask questions. Once you will move to the corporate, you might not get this opportunity. You can freely ask questions, clear your doubts, or whatever you have in your mind. You can express that freely and have a healthy discussion in the class, which might not be the case wherein you will be in corporate. You only have to be there, meeting your targets and finishing all the tasks before deadline. So the students must utilize the platform, classrooms as a platform to uh, hone their communication skills. In our classrooms, we have seen that maybe 5-10% of the students are very good communicator, but another 30-40 are good at communication, but they have fear of public speaking. And then again 40-50 who are not so good at communication. So emphasis should not be just on those 5-10 who already have good communication. The emphasis should also be on those remaining 30-40 who have good communication but have that inbuilt fear that if I'll ask questions, people will laugh at me. So making a very conducive environment in the class is also very important for our students to communicate properly. And then how you can be a good communicator while you are listening. Again, we have to pay attention. Again, it can be considered in both the scenario. One is that you are in a conference, you are there in a workshop, or the other scenario can be that you are in a classroom wherein two-way communication is happening. So you have to be a good listener. So when you are on the other side of the table, you're not speaking, you are listening, then few things that you have to keep in mind to ensure that the other person perceives that you are listening to them. So few things: look at the speaker directly, put aside your distracting thoughts, don't mentally prepare a rebuttal, and listen to the speaker's body language also. At times, because of cultural differences, the tone of the student is such that they might sound a bit aggressive, though they are not, right? So we also have to have that empathy. Someone have already written this word here, Dr. Stella, that empathy and body language is very important. So when we are listening, we don't just have to listen to the words. We have to also listen to the tone very empathetically. We also have to pay attention to the body language, and we also have to, if possible, if in a class we are in middle of a session, we know our students so well, so we also must also pay attention to the cultural background they come from. To show that we are listening, we always nod occasionally, we smile and use other facial expressions. Our posture also is very important because then it helps or encourages the speaker to engage more with the audience and to carry on with his or her thoughts. Provide feedback. If you want to ask questions, or few minutes back, we were discussing about when the students are not able to put up the question clearly, then what we should do. So, we can use sentences like, if I have understood properly, this is what you want to know. And then the student will respond in a yes or no, and you can carry on with your conversation. So providing feedback is very important. Defer judgment. Don't just, make judgment about a speaker before they finish their point, or they have not even finished the topic they're talking about. So defer your judgment and respond appropriately. So when you are asked to share your opinions, you must share your opinion in a very polished and a professional manner, so that the other person should not be offended about how you are responding to their questions. So now there's a quiz as a listener, what you should do every 5 or 10 seconds in a conversation to show that you are paying attention. Options: look at the phone, interrupt the speaker, nod your head and say, or walk away in boredom. Dr. Chitra, I think you meant it other way around. Interrupt the speaker, I think you meant that, you should be asking question. But here, interrupting the speaker is not there in the same tone. So C is the right answer, that you nod your head to convey to the speaker that yes, definitely you are listening to them and you are attentive. And in such kind of online sessions, we keep on asking questions to see that, everyone is paying attention or not. Fine, good. So that is about how you can become a good communicator as a speaker or as a listener. This slide is also very important, when we talk about becoming a good communicator, specifically inside a class, we have to make different strategies depending upon the scenario we are in. Right? Say, for example, you are there inside a class, and all of us have noticed it, that it happens multiple times that there's a nuisance in the class. Just give me a minute, I'll connect my laptop to the charger. Yes. So we have scenarios wherein there is nuisance in the class, maybe deliberate, intentional nuisance. Maybe a student start making a weird noise in the class. It also can be that they start into deliberately enter into argument which is not even related to the topic that you're discussing and so on. There is indiscipline in the class. Two students start fighting. There's a debate happening and the discussion reaches to such a level that, there is a heated discussion in the class. So during such scenario, do you think aggression will help? Shouting at the student and tell them, be quiet and listen to me. I'm the boss of my class, so you have to obey me. That is the one option. The second option is, you can adopt a different strategy. So good that all of you agree with me that aggression does not help in such a scenario. What strategies do you normally use in such a case? If any one of you would like to share. When there is an indiscipline, there is nuisance in the class, what kind of strategies do you use to put the class back in order? Be vigilant, be calm, be consistent. Handle with kindness. Good. Professor Ankita. Calmly in a different way, we need to deal with this. Starting related with very interesting context that connecting most of the students. Good. Change the topic. Pause for a moment and talk them calmly. Try to know the fact. Good. Right? So this is also very important. So communication is not just about speaking and listening. There also are scenarios wherein we have to handle very strategically to ensure that we don't lose our temper. We are not aggressive, still we are able to control the situation. So Professor Urvi have mentioned, we try to understand the problem and solve it. And again, that is where the concept of good listening comes in picture. So if we will be an active listener and we'll try to understand the problem. Definitely we'll be able to come up with a solution. These days, we also communicate via email. So there are few etiquettes that we have to keep in mind. Just before going into this, can I quickly ask you, what are few things that irritate you in our email communication? All of us use email very frequently these days, right? So what are few things that irritate you in an email communication? Smileys, delay in reply, okay? Let's not focus on reply. You receive an email and there are certain content in the email which irritates you without proper subject. Fine. Incomplete info. Okay. Too long without context info. Fine. Good. What are the other things? Short communication. Fine. Okay. Irrelevant message. Quickly, I want everyone to respond. And again, it's the same thing which is happening. Out of 124, I think it's, just 5, 10, 15% who are communicating. Not clear info when the content is not relevant. I can see the same name on the chat window, and probably I look forward to others also to engage. The question is very simple. I just want to know the things that irritate you in an email communication, not in a formal language. Good. Short communication in play, incomplete. Anyone else? When they write, please find the attachment, but there is no attachment. Okay, good. Smileys, communication, and so on. You know what I don't like the most? I don't like unprofessional email IDs, specifically from students. Even though in our college we have these college IDs for the students, and we tell them to communicate with that only. But at times, there are email communication also, which the IDs are like coolguy.com, smart girl, 2004, so on and so on. So these are few things that irritate me. And apart from that, definitely smileys, short communication, context not being there. And Professor Ankita is saying I've seen so many email IDs, other nicknames also, abbreviating name of professors, right? So in addition to that, so that is why the question of email etiquettes comes in picture. So first thing is, when you're communicating on a mail, we should have a professional email address. Some of you mentioned that the subject line is not there, so we should be very, very clear about, what should be there in the subject line. We should maintain a professional tone. At times, we receive emails which are very, very unprofessional, and we have to be very clear about, because one thing which I always tell to my student is that when you are communicating in a digital world, you are creating your digital footprints. And it is very difficult to erase your digital footprint. Dr. Chitra have mentioned same is the case with WhatsApp, right? So we have to keep this very, very clear in mind, that we will not be able to erase our digital footprints. So it is very important that we should be very particular about what we are communicating, whether it is through email or through WhatsApp messages. So we have to maintain a professional tone. And this particular thing happens when we are frustrated, when our anxiety levels are very high, when we are angry, and so on. So when you are in that particular mood, avoid sending emails. Just maybe schedule it. If you are so eager, mujhe bhejna hai, rather than hitting the send button, hit the schedule button. So that after 1 hour, when you review it, you will realize it yourself. Oh, it's being so foolish to send such kind of a mail, right? Then keep the copy clear and concise. All of you touched upon that. Mark recipients in the appropriate tag. Read it twice before sending. Other important pointers, who want to reply to. At times, maybe a very frustrated employee have written a mail to the HOD and have put all the faculty members in CC, which was not required. And when the emails are being exchanged, the other person also is hitting reply all. And then it becomes more of a mockery rather than addressing a particular situation. So you should be very, very mindful about, in what scenario you should send the mail to all the recipients, or it is just professional to send it to one person. Don't share controversial topics. Don't email confidential information. Email signature etiquette is also very important. We have this provision wherein we can create our own signature. Normally, we have the tendency of writing our full designation, name, address, and also our social media links, LinkedIn, X, and so on. As academician, we also write about our Scopus ID and so on. So it is always important that we should, put all this information in our email signature. At times, people also have they prefer to write a small, beautiful quote in their email signature. But again, that should be very professional. If you want, you can do that. Avoid excessive abbreviations. That happens more in WhatsApp, and specifically if a WhatsApp message is coming from a team. Our students, there are few abbreviations which we are not even aware of. So maybe we have to Google it and find out, what is LOL, or what is the other abbreviations which they normally use. So avoid excessive abbreviation. Always introduce yourself first. Shorten the hyperlink. Check your attachment. Someone wrote that also in the chat, that when you receive a email without the attachment, and check your formatting. So the last and the most important point of effective communication is the 7 C's, which we should be very clear about whenever we are communicating with someone, right? So these 7 C's are, there should be clarity, there should be correctness, conciseness, courtesy, concreteness, consideration, and completeness. I'll take them one by one, and I've taken appropriate examples to make it more clear and for you to understand that why each of these C's are very important. So first one is clarity. Normally, I don't know about you, but normally whenever I read research papers research papers written by others is what we're talking about. It is not just research papers, but whenever I read textbook also, at times I feel that a very simple concept have been put in a very complex manner. I don't know how many of you have come across this scenario. When you read, then you think, oh, it was such a simple concept, but why it has been, and you specifically wonder as to why it has been put up in such a complex way. So this is why I've noticed in some of the books and also in some of the research papers. I don't know how many of you agree with me. So, which is why I believe that to have clarity in our communication, we should use common and simple language, right? At times, people think that if we will use a lot of jargons, if you will use a lot of complex sentences, then maybe people will perceive that you are very good at written communication. But trust me, that is not the case. We should try to be as simple, and the focus should be on having clarity of our thoughts. It should not happen that we put very difficult sentences in our presentation just to make our student realize that we know a lot, but when we have to explain that concept in the class, you're not able to do it properly. So it is always better that you should have your presentations, your work in a simple language, so that even if you're not there, the other person can understand it. So basically, your written communication should be in such a way that the other person can understand it the same way if you would not have been there. Right? So, which is possible only if we will use common and simple language. We will construct effective sentences and short paragraphs. Use concrete words and simple words instead of abstract words, and avoid unnecessary situation. All of us are talking about AI these days. So I also took help of AI, and these are two examples which I wanted to share with you. Yeah. So the first one, which you see on the left-hand side, is the same thing which has been constructed using a complex sentences, and the same thing on the right-hand side with very simple statements, right? So the complex statement says the multifaceted contribution of women in India, spanning socio-economic, political, and cultural spheres, constitute an indispensable elements of nation's progress, their historical marginalization notwithstanding their but growing participation in the traditionally male-dominated sector, coupled with persistent advocacy for gender equality. The sentence, the full stop is there towards the end of the sentence, right? So when I had gone midway, I could not understand what the writer is about to say. So I start from the first word again. It is very difficult to understand, but when you put the same thing in a very, very simple language with so many sentences, here we have a sentence which is equivalent to a paragraph. And on the other side, we have small sentences which are very easy to comprehend. So the same thing is being communicated with a lot of sentences, with a lot of full stops, which makes sense to the reader. So that is how, once we will have simple sentences, we'll have more clarity in our thoughts. And also, when someone will be reading it, they also will be able to understand it better. The next is correctness. Just look at the example which I have on the right-hand side. One sentence which says, I love baking my family and my friends. So just imagine how it will be perceived. The person will think that the person loves to bake his family and friends. And why is it so? Because of not proper usage of punctuation. And when you look at after using proper punctuation, it says, I love baking, I love my family, and I love my friends. So just see how the meaning has, altered because of putting punctuations at place. So that is why you check your mistakes in terms of punctuation, grammar, capitalization, check misspelled word. And again, unlike our parents and our elders, maybe 2-3 decades back, wherein they didn't had these tools, today you can simply install Grammarly on your devices, and it will prompt you, where the punctuation or spelling error is there, so that you can correct it before sending the final draft to the stakeholder. But again, it doesn't mean that you should stop using your brain and blindly trust Grammarly, because at times, you have to again take a decision as to whether what is the right format for constructing the sentence. So use appropriate tools to ensure that your document is correct in all way. Conciseness, which means that you should be very concise in your thoughts and your words. Normally we say a good speech is like a pencil. It has to have a point, right? Similarly, there also is a saying that, whenever in school, our teachers used to tell us to write an essay, they used to say that it should be like girls' skirts, short to be interesting enough and long to cover all the topics. So we have to be concise in such a way that we are not putting a lot of content which is not related to each other, which is irrelevant. And we just want to show that we have done a good work. So we present something which spans 45-50 pages. That is not important. The quality is important. I always tell my students when they ask me, how many pages should be there in a dissertation or in a report, I said, quantity is not important. What I need is quality. If you're able to give me quality in 5 pages, that's more than enough for me, right? But even though they know that it will not be able to summarize it in 5 pages, because a lot of data and other things also have to be put in place. Then is courtesy. I already have explained it, that we should be courteous and polite in our conversations, specifically with students. That too in the current age, which wherein the students at times are very impatient, right? So we have to be courteous. Someone wrote in the chat box also that we appreciate the student when they ask question in the class. So, those are the small things we actually are talking about, that we should encourage our students to interact more in the class, and it will happen only when they will feel comfortable that actually can ask questions to the teacher. Gone are those days when we were so afraid, scared of our teachers, that we could not ask them questions if we meet them in the corridor. But things have changed now. So we have to create that kind of conducive environment in the class wherein students feel comfortable with us as a teacher, as a mentor. Doesn't mean that they should start taking liberty, but definitely that comfort level should be there, wherein uh, they find it at ease when they have to ask questions, or to pose any kind of query or doubts which they have inside the class. At times, as an educator, what we also can do is that to develop that kind of confidence. I normally tell them that if you have any question, you can approach me even after the class. So maybe after 4:30 or so, half an hour, I'm available. You can come with the doubts, and I'll try and clarify that. So we have to have approaches, or maybe you can tell them, if you have any doubt, just share your doubt on WhatsApp, and we can respond to it whenever we have time. So we also have to develop strategy to make them comfortable so that they are able to ask questions. And also one thing very important in the current scenario is that we have to be respectful about the gender, about the cultural background of the student. In our colleges, we also have students from various countries. We have international students. So we have to be sure of that we respect their understanding, their culture, and other things also. We have a student from Korea in our batch. And so at times what happens, in a flow, at times we start speaking in Hindi for a while. Then we realize, no, we have international students. So the only language that we have to use in our classes is English. So all those things also have to be kept in mind while we are there in a session. Then concreteness. I've just taken examples since I'm a student of international business. So I've taken relevant examples. Just look at these two sentences which are there at the bottom of the slide. The first sentence is, India's economy is growing at a very fast pace, and soon India will become one of the leading global economy. This is sentence one. And the sentence two is, according to IMF, India is projected to grow at a 6.8% in the current fiscal year, and will become the third biggest economy behind the US and China by financial year 2028. Which sentence is making more meaning to you? Second one. Good, Dr. Chitra. Why? Why do you think second one is more impactful than the first one? Why the second one is more impactful than the first one? Facts, goods. That is Safina. So what data? Fine, good. So what we have done is that the second statement says that this statement is given by IMF, which is a leading international organization. So when you have added that particular name, you have added basically graphical representation, data, references given in the second sentence, and so on. Yeah, correct. So second sentence is more impactful because it has a lot of facts. It talks about at what rate the Indian economy will be growing 6.8%. It also talks about that it will become third largest economy by financial year 2028. Unlike the first sentence, which says that will become one of the leading global economy. By when? We're not talking about that. And who is making that statement? Maybe Dr. Alka. But who knows Dr. Alka? Right? But when we say IMF have made the statement, all of us know IMF. So we believe that, this actually is a more impactful statement. So that is what is also required in our communication. We should avoid engaging in vague and general messages which result in no response. We should try to substantiate our information with more facts and figures. And trust me, the more facts and figures we'll try to bring in our communication, in our work, the more you will read. Right? Maybe IMF have said this thing, World Bank would have said some more thing. World Bank would have said that India will become third largest economy by financial year 2030s. S&P have said it will become a third largest economy after 2030 and so on. So, different sources will have different information. It is up to your judgment which you think is more relevant. Right. So that also we have to keep in mind. The more we will read, the more information we'll have, the more content we'll have, and more confident we'll be, and we will end up having a good communication, whether in our classes or through our written communication. And consideration. Again, a very nice cartoon which you see on your screen, that a teacher asked a student to write down the composition for water, which was H2. And just see what the student have written. He have written all the alphabets from H2O. Right? So we have to be considerate about who is the target audience. I'm taking this presentation for the academicians. If I'll have to do this presentation for the students, maybe I'll take up different examples. Right. So we have to adapt our presentations, adapt our work, considering the audience that we have to address. Right. So we have to prepare our material from the reader's point of view. What is the age of my reader? What is the cultural background? What is the educational background of my reader? So those things have to be kept in mind while we are making our presentations, while we are writing something. So we have to understand the needs and problems of the receiver, and we have to be positive and optimistic in our work. Uncompleteness, which means that all the facts have been put together. Normally, one example that I would like to share out here is when the students shared the first or the final draft of their dissertation with us, we normally tell them, these are the gaps that you need to look into. Same thing we also have to do for our own work. Normally, I tell my students that, you still have that kind of inquisitiveness alive in you that you had when you were a small child, just maybe 3 or 4 years old, when you used to ask your mother time and again, what is this? Why it is there? How it works? When did it arrive here? Who does it? How it is done, and so on. So the 5 W's should always be there in your mind. So what, when, where, why, who, and in addition to that, how. So when you are writing something, when you are making your presentation for the class, just revise your work, keeping these 5 W's in mind. In the last slide, when we were talking about India becoming a third largest economy by financial year 2028, the first sentence was vague because it did not had answer to these questions. When will India become a third largest economy? Who said that? Who said it? So those things were missing. So each and every sentence have to be evaluated in those sense to ensure that there are no gaps. And when you will try and fill in all the gaps, again, your content will be rich. You will be more confident about your work. So it has to be complete from all respect. You should provide all necessary information. You should answer all the questions which could be asked, and should include additional information if that is required. Again, one last quiz for the session, which this is based on not the previous few slides, but what all we have discussed so now. So which of the following are barriers to effective communication? Distraction, noise and movement, poor timing, or all of the above? So can I have the answers now? Fine, good. This was a easy one. Fine, good. So barriers to effective communication can also be, poor connectivity, specifically when we are having sessions like this. Finally, another call coming in between. My daughter had called me twice since the session started. So, such kind of calls also cause distraction, and we have to be mindful about how to respond uh, to such scenarios. So I just simply within the session, I wrote, I'm in a meeting, and after that, she has not disturbed me. So we have to devise ways to ensure that there are no distractions, there are no barriers while we are trying to communicate with others. So as I said, that in addition to an effective start, it is also equally important to have an effective end. So this is how I normally end my presentation, and this is a good news for all of you also that this is the last slide we are on. So we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more than we say. This is the motto of my life when we talk about communication, that when you will listen more, or when we interact in such kind of sessions, or when I interact in the classrooms, there is a lot that we learn. So it doesn't mean that we can learn only by reading ourselves. We also learn when we interact in the class. So rather than speaking, it's equally important that we should also use our 2 ears to ensure that we are also able to get a lot of ideas that we can work upon. That will also help us in enriching our content, uh, not only for meaningful classroom discussions, but otherwise also when we have to also communicate in a informal environment. So that's all from my side. Professor Alka Mauriya, over to you now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Uh, yes. So we come to the end of Madam's session, and I think that it's a very wonderful session because from the comment I have read, all are very positive, and I think that participant will have take in and they will learn so much of things from the presentation. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us your time. Though today is a holiday, I also think that it's a holiday out in Pune. But in spite of that, in spite of taking holiday, you give your time for us. Thank you so much, ma'am. And we hope and look forward to engage your service again, ma'am. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening, ma'am.
And thank you, everyone, all the academicians, for being such a nice audience. And I hope I have been able to add some value through my presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Have a nice evening, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
So, a participant, today we have one extra